My very, very special guest today is John Michael Howson, better known to a lot of people as John Michael Hollywood Howson.
Oh, that's a long time ago, Lily.
It is indeed. And we've been friends forever as well.
That's right, we were neighbours years ago.
Years ago back in Los Angeles.
And Bo in Easton, Balaclava.
Down in Balaclava, Caulfield as well.
Yeah.
But we met in Los Angeles,
Really?
and now
Got to know each other.
We did, and now we're both back here in Melbourne, Australia.
Yeah, do you know a funny story about the Hollywood thing? Mike Walsh used to call me that on his television show, which I did for years and years, and they don't do television like that anymore, unfortunately. And so John Michael Hollywood House and what so. And there was a guy in Sydney who was a sort of a race course, what would you call him? He was a guy, authority on racehorses. Mm-hmm. His name was Hollywood George Edser. And I was in the what's the name of the hotel up in King's Cross, very famous hotel with a bar where show business and racing identities, etc. used to hang out. And a guy came up to me one day and he said, "What's going to win at the fourth at Randwick?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, you're the tipster." I said, "Wrong, Hollywood. You want Hollywood George Edser. I'm Hollywood John Michael Hollywood Howson." I said, "If you want to know about the movies, I can tell you."
That is hilarious. No. Now, John Michael, one of the reasons I really wanted you on this show is because you have one of the best spirits of anybody that I know. You are so positive. You're always doing amazing things. You're supposed to be retired now, but you're actually busier than ever.
That word. It's a dreadful word, retirement. I mean, I have a friend who's 85 and who just came back with his wife from Bali, and he said, "I'm overwhelmed by the amount of work waiting for me," because he's into property management. And I said, "You should be a couch potato." He said, "I'd go mad." And I think I would too,
Absolutely.
I have nothing to do.
So some of the things you're doing now, people would look at your life and think that you had just the best life ever. But from what I'm seeing, you've really got the best life ever right now.
The best life is every day of your life. If you wake up and you're not in the obituary column, then it should be the best day of your life. Well, you know what? Some years ago, I started getting interested in writing the musical theatre. I've always loved musical theatre. The first show I ever saw was Evie Hayes and Annie Get Your Gun at Her Majesty's Theatre. And I've loved the musical theatre ever since. And many years ago, I wrote my first musical, which was a show called Razzmatazz, set in Little Lonsdale Street, Melbourne in the 1920s, because that was a pretty racy part of town. I also wrote the last pantomime they ever did at the Tivoli, called The Clown That Lost Its Smile, and it was based on the Channel 10 show I wrote and was in, the Magic Circle Club. And it was the most lavish pantomime. It looked like a Follies show. And the funny part about it, we did 2-3 performances a day or whatever, and the curtain would go up and most of the stalls were filled with adults because they'd come to see this fabulous show. It really was. Thanks to our wonderful costume designer, the late Ted Dunn, who was Fred Bear, and the set design and the whole thing. So that was marvellous as well, doing pantomime.
You started off in working with kids and doing children's.
I wrote children's television, Magic Circle Club at Channel 10, which led into Adventure Island at the ABC, and I wrote the show, wrote the lyrics. Bruce Rowland did the music, the wonderful composer Bruce Rowland. He did the music, and we had 2 songs in every show. God, how we did it, I don't know. We did. Just did it. It's one of those, how do we do it? Now I think, how did we do it? At the time, we just did it.
And how'd you get started in all of that to start with?
I was writing a variety show. I lived in England for some years and did a lot of...
You were born in Australia? You were born in Australia?
In Elwood.
Yeah.
And went to England and for some years, and I wrote for magazines and whatever there, and used to do spec scripts. I did some television shows in England, including some stuff for That Was the Week That Was with David Frost, which was a sensation at the time. And I used to write comedic lines for comedians. I'd go around the various pubs where they had comedians and see their act, and did say afterwards, "You want me to write some lines?" And they said, "Yeah, write them, and if they're any good, we'll pay you."
Now, what got you out to England at that time?
Because everybody went to England.
Everybody went to England in those days?
You know, that was a rite of passage. You know, every young... And I must tell you, most kids wanted to get out of Melbourne because it was so damn boring. I mean, it really was. It was I mean, one of the things, because everything was closed on a Sunday, it was very, very puritanical. You know, the pubs shut at 6, and there were some nice restaurants, and we used to go to marvellous dance halls around. There was the rowing club down at Albert Park Lake, and a place called the St Columbus Church in Elwood. They had a marvellous hall there, dances, and place off St Kilda Road, I can't remember now, but there were dance halls over the thing. There was no drinking. In fact, if you had a ball, if you went to a ball at somewhere like the Palais de Dance or whatever, you had to take your liquor in a kit bag. They never sold liquor. Wow. You had to take your own in a kit bag.
So, but back then it wasn't so much what are you going to do with the rest of your life as what do I want to do.
You wanted to get out of Melbourne. One of the things that we used to, I mean, this is how desperate we were. You could get tickets to go on board the various liners as sort of a day trip, and go and walk around and have a look at the ship. We used to do that every Sunday. We'd go down to Port Melbourne without clutching our tickets from the shipping lines and go on these ships like the Orsova, the Himalaya, and these various big liners, the Strathnaver, and we'd walk around and say, "Oh, I'll go in, I'm going to England, I'll go on this one, or that one," or whatever. It turned out we actually went to England on a what would you call it, a tub from the Sitmar line called the Fair Sky, and it was filled with young Australians making the Great Escape. And the funny part about it, I came from a fairly tolerant sort of household. I was growing up with people having a drink and it was no big deal. In fact, my friends were the same way. But there were a lot of people that had come from very restricted homes where they never were allowed to have a drink. The moment they got on that ship and it was halfway down Port Phillip Bay, they were on the booze, and they stayed on the booze all the way to England.
Oh, gosh.
Whereas we were used to it, you know. So it just goes to show they were like bulls being let out of the pen.
Did you go on your own, or were there a bunch of you?
It was a group of friends, and one of my closest friends now back from he stayed on, and for years, decades, and became quite a successful actor in repertory, and did some shows in the West End and whatever. And he came back about 10 years ago, and he lives in North Caulfield. Mm. So that's, I would say, no. And another one lives over in God knows where, but anyway, unfortunately, most of them have gone to that great fun parlour in the sky. But I have some friends in Sydney that we met on the ship that remained friends, and I became a godfather to their children, and so it was great relationships were formed, and we were not habitués of an area called Kangaroo Valley. You know, there's Australians. I thought that was boring. We didn't go to England to mix with Australians in Kangaroo Valley, which a lot of people did. So I wasn't one of those Australians. We mixed with all sorts of people from all around the world, and I got to love Britain and Ireland, and particularly in England, the great tolerance for everything that at that time, you know, it was like a dog being left off a leash, because, you know, it was very open, and compared to Melbourne, I mean, there were a lot of restrictions and things even there with booze and whatever, but compared to Melbourne, it was very open, and of course you had the theatre in London, which was, to me, just
So you were always drawn to theatre?
Always. So, yeah, I just loved watching great talent do things, and I saw many great stars working in Britain, and later on, funny enough, I got to know a few people, like Albert Finney, for instance.
Wow.
I saw him do Luther on the stage, and he was a huge star at the time because he'd done Tom Jones, the movie, which was a sensation.
Were you working in theatre over there as well?
No, I never worked in the theatre. I just wrote lines for comedians and some television shows, but I wrote for them. Bread and butter came from writing for the magazines.
Oh.
And one of them was, I wrote for a fashion magazine, which took me into sort of a wonderful world of high fashion and menswear. A lot of the big designers were just getting into menswear. So I was writing about their forays into menswear. And I met a lot of the top designers that had gone into menswear, like Zahadi Amy's and names forgotten now, Victor Stiebel and all sorts of people that were very famous, and the same in Paris with Pierre Cardin and people like that. So I met them, interviewed them, talked about their range and wrote stories in the magazines about the latest things. They all started off designing ties.
Wow.
And then they went into belts, and then they went into shirts. And I met a lovely Jewish gentleman in London called Harry Israel Brooke, and he had a company called Railbrook, and he was the first to really come out with fabulous shirts and with real fashion shirt, not just a shirt with buttons up the front, but marvellous patterns and collars and whatever. And I promoted him a lot in the magazine because I just thought it was great that you put on a suit you might wear 5 days a week, but with putting one of Harry's shirts on, you lifted the whole thing. It was wonderful.
So you just started writing, or you actually got a job at a magazine writing?
Yeah, that's what I did, and the fashion thing. And I went to the various clothing fairs. The Milan was one, and I think they had one in Cologne and somewhere in...
Sounds like you had an amazing time.
It was a champagne life on a beer income. It really was. And, I met marvellous... I mean, the fashion world was
well, in those days, the fashion world was the entertainment world.
There still was the great... designers in the women's wear. As I said, a lot of them went into menswear, but I used to see a lot of the collections, and they were the great design. I mean, fashion was fashion. They did their summer fashions in winter and their winter fashions in summer and whatever, and it was quite marvellous to see great artists, and they are artists at work.
Absolutely. But so why did you come back? How long did you stay?
Because I got homesick.
You did? What did that feel like?
I mean, I suppose that sounds crazy. I wanted to come home. I promised my mother that I would come home, quote, next year. Well, next year came and went. And I thought, I had a darling grandmother I loved dearly, and I thought, I better go home because Nana may not be long for this world. Who knows? It was, she did. She lived a long time.
Now, did you do the phone calls once a week? Because I know in those days
you couldn't. You know how much a phone call cost in those days?
How much?
And a fortune, more than I could afford. And there was no internet or whatever, so you wrote letters. How wonderful. You actually sat down and wrote a letter. I made sure I did about, not only a letter, but a sort of postcard a couple of times a week. And if you wanted to make a phone call to Australia, believe it or not, you would ring up, I suppose, the British version of the BMG, as it was, who controlled all the telephones, and made a booking for a phone call.
Gosh.
So you'd say, I'd like to make a booking for Australia on Friday at 6 o'clock or whatever. And then you'd sit by the phone waiting for it to ring. And two of my flatmates, a wonderful couple, Lynn and Terry Poltz, brother and sister, and they're still in Sydney, and I'm godfather to Lynn's son, and is now, makes me a great grandfather, Timmy's all grown up with a family of his own, but Lynn and Terry came from a wonderful family in Sydney. Their father was a bookmaker and whatever, so really marvellous. And my dad had been in the racing business, so we had a lot to talk about. Anyway, they'd sit by the phone would ring, and it was mum and dad at the other end, and they'd cry through the whole phone call. They cried, mum and dad.
Do you remember how much it was? Because when I went to America 30 years ago, a call from America to Australia was like $2 a minute.
Something like that. It was a lot of money.
That was a lot.
You didn't do it too often.
No.
You relied on the parents to call you, or rather than you call them. But it was those days have gone through, but they were one. I'm glad I lived those, and because travelling in Europe was much more fun. Apart from the fact there was no terrorism, you were safe everywhere, and the drug culture hadn't happened, which is wonderful, and it was all exciting. But you weren't flooded out by tourists everywhere. Noel Coward wrote a song called "Why Do the Wrong People Travel when the Right People Stay at Home." And I think that was true. Too many people, too many millions of people travelling. And, I mean, we were able to go into places at that time and walk into museums and be the only person there or the only crowd group there. And it was totally different because, I mean, there were millions travelling, but not to the point that there are today, because if you wanted, from America, if you wanted to travel to mostly you went by liner. I mean, the big jets started to happen in the late 50s, early 60s, but they didn't take off until really the late 60s, where they were dumping thousands and thousands of people every day. So it was a much more civilised time. I feel like I'm talking about the 18th century and doing the grand tour.
But it's not. You're talking about
it's only a few decades ago.
1950s?
No, in the early 1960s.
60s.
We went to England on July the 20th, 1960, sailing out of Port Melbourne on the Fair Sky. There you are, remember that.
Wow. And you came back?
In 1965, I think, 4 or 5. Yeah.
With every intention of staying back here?
No, not really. I came back. I thought I'll see Mum and Nana and whatever. I had itchy feet. But Channel 10 was beginning. And I thought, as I've done all this comedic writing and stuff, and I had a bit of a track record, I went to see them and said, I think you need a good writer. And they gave me a job on a show called The Ray Taylor Show, which lasted about 6 months, I think. See, Channel 10 was Channel O in those days.
Yes,
and
I
couldn't
remember.
be received all over Melbourne. There were pockets of Melbourne that didn't get it. And anyway, so I loved writing for the Ray Taylor Show. I don't know how many people watched it, but we was, quote, controversial, unquote. I mean, we were the first show to do political satire, and Australians had not seen that. And when you did a joke about the Premier or whoever, they thought this was dreadful. How dare you make jokes about the Premier or politicians or people of authority.
What a long way we've come.
Yeah, it was the first political satirical show on air, yeah. So, and Ray Taylor, the star, forgotten by most, was a genius. And he really was. So
I can't say I remember him.
No problem. No, it's a long time ago. People don't remember what happened last year, let alone 40, 50 years ago. Anyway, Ray was marvellous and had a marvellous personality and very, very sardonic and whatever. Not loved by everybody, but he was just right with that sort of marvellous view of the world. And I love writing political satire. See, because I'd seen all of that in England, but we didn't have it here.
Yeah. But then you went from that to children's theatre?
Yeah, but that's getting on to that. What happened was the show ended, and because it got rave reviews, and those who watched it loved it, but not enough people watched it because of our strange signal, the Channel O signal. Anyway, it was cancelled, and as I was sort of leaving the building, a man called Godfrey Phillip came up to me, and he had been working on their children's show, which was not too successful, and he said to me, would you like to write a children's show? I said, I can't. What are you talking about? I write political satire. He said, no. He said, you've got a marvellous approach to, I think you could. So I thought about it, and I sat down and wrote The Magic Circle Club, a fantasy show set in a magic island, and there was Mother Hubbard who lived in the cupboard, and he actually played by Fred Tupper, who had been one of Melbourne's top race callers, and he'd retired and wanted to keep working. And I said, would you like to play the dame in a pantomime? And he said, I'd love to. So we had Freddie Tupper, we had Colin McEwen, Ernie Bourne, Ted Dunn as Fred Bear, me as Fifi Bear, and the show was hosted by a lady called Nancy Cato. Anyway, it turned out to be a rip-roaring success, and Channel 0 switched to Channel 10, which made it better, and the show went national, and everywhere we went, for personal appearances, we were mobbed by thousands of kids. In Perth, they actually had to close off St George's Terrace.
Wow.
It was unbelievable. Anyway, Channel 10, for reasons best known to themselves, just after 2 or 3 years, really sort of decided, they weren't into today, everything's into merchandising. And we wanted to go into merchandising. We said, why don't we have storybooks and dolls and things and whatever? And they looked at us like we're totally mad, because no one. The first big Disney did do merchandising in a small way, but they just didn't get the whole idea that you could have products, which would have made the show lucrative. Anyway, they cancelled it, and before we were out the door, we'd literally done a deal with the ABC, but we couldn't use the name Magic Circle Club, so I called Adventure Island, and we did our last Magic Circle Club appearance in Brisbane, and flying back on the Convair, remember Convairs?
I don't.
They were the pre-jet.
Wow.
From Brisbane, I was sitting next to the wonderful Liz Harris, who was married to Leonard Teal, who had been in a homicide and whatever. And Liz used to appear as a guest star sometimes on Magic Circle. I was sitting next to her and I said, Liz, by the time we get to the end of this flight, I'll have the outline for the new show. And I did, handwritten on a legal pad. And that was what we sold to the ABC. It was an independent production. Godfrey Phillip owned the production company, and it was independent, run independently from the ABC, and the ABC hated us because we got top ratings, we got great publicity, we were enormously successful, and that's anathema to the ABC, run by boring bureaucrats. So from the time we started, there were people white-anting the show, but they couldn't defy success. So it ran for 6 years. And when it was cancelled by the ABC, and they came for no reason, it was still
outrageous.
A huge success. But the ABC, dreary little bureaucrats that they are, wanted to cancel it because they weren't running it. So they cancelled the show and did a thing, I'll never forget it, In Search of Blue Ribbons, about a girl with a pony, which rated an asterisk.
John Michael, do you still have some of those pieces of merchandising?
No, I've got the books, but yes, we did a series of books for Adventure Island. And I'll tell you how stupid the ABC were. We had because we were sort of doing commercial on the ABC because we'd have copies of the book on the set and whatever. They printed, I think their initial run was something like 50,000. Well, they sold out in a week. And we said, well, why don't we do another run? Oh, that would take this and that and whatever. And so we had only 50, but they're collector's items now anyway.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And just to remind people, at that time in Australia, there were only 3 television stations in total?
Well, yeah, there was...
4. Channel 10 was 4.
Channel 10, Channel 7, Channel 9, the ABC.
The C, yeah.
And anyway, the show became an award-winning, huge success. And the funny part about it, when this show that these bureaucrats replaced us with failed dismally, they had to go back to repeating old episodes of Adventure Island. Now, the funny part about that is I kept saying, this is pre-colour, and I kept saying, why don't we film this? Let's edit it down. We'll do the 5 episodes, and then let's do a special day where we do an hour. Because I'll edit the 5 episodes down to 1 hour, and the 5 episodes will go to air during the week, and then we have this 1 hour in colour. We'll do it on a 16mm colour film. And they, what do you want to do that for?
You were really ahead of your time then.
Well, I've always been ahead of my time, unfortunately, and I wish I hadn't been, because they're going to have I'm going to have on my gravestone, nobody ever listened to me. Because this show could have been running now, because it was a fairy story. If it had been on colour film, it could be running now. I mean, but they didn't. Anyway, that's in the past, and I have no regrets. What the heck, you move on.
The ABC hasn't changed much in its attitude, has it?
It's not it is what it is. It's like a bureaucracy, a top-heavy bureaucracy. It has its own culture. I don't know. And I'll tell you how crazy they are. Every week we'd have to do photo calls. Mm-hmm. Like what we would do, a photographer would come in with the publicity people and we'd pose from scenes from the shows, and they'd take these photos, presumably for the press. When the show ended, now over 5 years, that's an awful lot of photographs, hundreds, thousands. So I said to the publicity department, can I have a set of pictures, please, of the show?
Of course.
Oh, we can't find them. We don't know
where they are. They were all lost? I've never been able to work that out. They were all lost?
They're lost or burned or put away. They wouldn't give it to us. The photographs of 5 years of work.
What a shame.
As you can see, I do have some pictures over on the wall of various Adventure Island scenes or whatever. But it was an interesting time. Mm-hmm. And the wonderful part is now, if people recognise me, people come up and say, when I was a little kid, I watched Magic Circle or Adventure Island, and mostly Adventure Island. I'm thrilled by that.
I remember those shows from my childhood. So when did this America, Hollywood thing
Well, what happened after that was Mike Walsh was doing a Tonight Show in Melbourne out of Channel 7, and he loved what I wrote and whatever, and asked me if I'd write comedy for his show, which I did, and it was very successful. And at the same time, not only doing Mike Walsh, but I did appearances on Don Lane as a character called Victor Venture, and I would come on to campy, mad stuff. So one thing led to another, and Mike said to me, when he's got his own show, why don't you come on my show? And I said, what would I do? He said, just talk. So we decided to talk about what movies were coming to town and funny stories about Hollywood or whatever. Anyway, the movie companies started to say, well, we'd like you to go to Los Angeles to cover this movie or that star or whatever, or New York or London or whatever. Finished up that I was flying around the world doing interviews with celebrities for the Mike Walsh show. Then it sort of expanded. I started covering overseas events. I covered the Charles and Diana wedding and things like that.
Did you pinch yourself? I mean, this was...
Well, I was quite amazed that suddenly I was, getting into film studios I only dreamed about, and sitting down in the commissary, the canteen, and having dinner, lunch with publicity people, and then going and interviewing big stars. And, well, yes, it was marvellous. And then, I got to know, mostly it's just ships that pass in the night, hello, goodbye. But I did get to know some of the stars quite well over the years. People like Sir Roger Moore, because I covered a lot of Bond movies. And I got to know Roger quite well. He was a lovely man. And Lord Attenborough, Sir Richard Attenborough, Lord Attenborough.
So you were flying back and forth at that time?
All the time. I lived on planes. And
they put you up in nice hotels?
All the time. Except, funny enough, I must say, Kerry Packer was very generous. I mean, we always travelled in those days first class.
Wow.
And we always stayed in nice hotels. But if I was in a long shoot in LA, I preferred to stay in a service department, and which were much cheaper than staying at the Beverly Wilshire or whatever. So I'd come back and the accounts would come in. And I remember the boss at Channel 9, Sam Chisholm, said, I want to talk to you about your expenses. Thought, I'm spending too much money. He said, why aren't you staying at the Wilshire? Why are you staying in these dumps? I said, they're not dumps, they're service apartments. But I said, I feel happier because I can get up and make myself a piece of toast or a cup of tea. I don't have to rely on room service. And when you're there for 4 or 5 weeks, it's a long time. And, of course, a cup of tea in some of those hotels costs you $20, you know.
Yeah.
Enormous. Whereas you just go and get a tea bag and make your own tea, and it was lovely. So I must say, but I'll never say anything contrary to the Packers. They were very good. And I'll tell you what they did, which is something marvellous. You do the negotiations for your contract, say, in January, and the contract wouldn't come through because of the legal thing till December, the end of the year. But they agreed with everything. They never tried to diddle you, never tried to shortchange you. They were wonderful people.
Well, and they obviously loved the job that you were doing.
Well, I had a wonderful thing happen to me once. Kerry Packer was the big fella, and he'd sometimes come into Channel 9 Sydney, where we did the Wild Show, and one day I'd asked Sam Chisholm if I could go on a show on the ABC, and he said no, because I didn't mind you go on the ABC because it wasn't really a rival to the commercial station. So he said no. I thought, that's a bit unfair. Anyway, I said, why? Why won't you let me? And a voice said, because you're too valuable to us. And in walked Kerry Packer, who was in the next office or next room. And I said, thank you for saying that. He said, you're a funny bugger, aren't you? You're funny. And I thought, how wonderful. And recently I wrote a letter to James Packer saying that with all the criticism hurled at the Packers, I found them wonderful to work for. I really did. I have no criticism. They were fair, and having a compliment like that from Kerry Packer was like winning the Oscar.
I'm sure James in particular would agree with that.
James wrote me a lovely letter in return.
Nice.
Yeah.
Hey, it seems like there was a mutual respect there, and you. Well,
I like doing what I'm doing. They like what I did. In fact, I'll tell you, this is a funny story. When Fergie and Andrew got married, we covered that, and our location was on top of a topless double-decker bus, right up, they didn't had the cameras up there, and they sent two luminaries from the network, who should remain nameless, to actually do the commentary. And I was there, I'd done a lot of pre-wedding stories, which had gone to air on the Walsh Show, and I was there just to add the odd line or two. Anyway, there was a segment where they were signing the registry, and there were no pictures coming through except, outside pictures of Westminster Abbey or whatever. The two luminaries could not comment because I knew, having lived in London for 4 or 5 years, I knew every stick upon a stone. I knew all the historical stories. And here I am praising myself to high heaven, but it's true. And suddenly these two wide-eyed luminaries were stuck for words, and the director said, you. So I pointed the camera at me, and I filled in for probably, 15 minutes about.
I'm surprised you weren't doing the actual.
They always get people that. This is the rule of television. Or if you're going to do something, that hire the person that knows the least about it. I'm serious. Hire the person that knows nothing. Haven't you seen some of the commentaries from New Year or events, special events? People don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
They don't know any of the facts. They have no idea. Anyway, and I had done the Di and Charles wedding, a lot of that. But so when we came back to Australia, Sam Chisholm said, I've thought about sending you, and then I thought, no, maybe not, maybe it's... But he said, I'm so glad I sent you because you saved the show. Otherwise it would have been 15 minutes of two luminaries looking shocked, stunned, because they didn't have anything to talk about. So I did the history of Westminster Abbey. Anything that came into view, I talked about.
John Michael, so many people would look at your career and say, wow, I would love to have a career like that. But it seems to me that it's sort of, you were at the right place at the right time with the right skill set and made it up as you went along.
I call it follow the yellow brick road. You never know where it's going to lead you. and just go on. And I would never do anything I couldn't do. If they said tomorrow, we want you to be a sports broadcaster, I'd say, forget it, I know nothing about it. I can watch it on the television and go, oh, that's marvellous, isn't that a marvellous tennis match or whatever. I couldn't do that. I couldn't do a science show. There are lots of things I couldn't do. But a lot of people, this is the problem. A lot of people, they get offered the money and they'll say, they'll do it, and they're hopeless. But instead of saying, oh, I don't think I could do that, they accept anything and everything simply because they think they're fabulous. A lot of people think they're fabulous. And so, you know, one of the reasons Bert's so great, Bert said to me years ago that he knew what he could do. Bert Newton.
Yes.
He said years ago, I know what I can do and I don't do anything I can't do. And I learned from that, and don't do anything if you have nerves about it, don't, if you don't have an expertise about something or a knowledge of something. I mean, if you wanted to do a history show, I watch history shows on cable all the time. I love them. But I could do that because I read history, massive amounts of historical biographies and history. I could probably do a good history show. I could do a great movie show. Things you can do. But there are a lot of people just leap in and do things, and they are totally under-talented when it comes to the subject matter.
So what would you say is the basic difference between Americans and Australians as a people, having lived there?
Americans don't ever... Well, I don't think Australia's beginning to change, but Americans have enormous confidence in themselves. And you do see a lot of idiots on doing commentary, particularly on CNN. CNN seems to be the honeypot for idiots. But they've got all the confidence in the world to get in and do it. And you think, and they've got more front than Myers, as the saying goes.
John Michael, you've always been very supportive of Israel. Where does that come from?
When I was a little boy, my playmates were Jewish. I didn't really know what Jewish people were. They were just lovely people. They were refugees, probably come from Austria, I think, in the late 30s. And I was... they were living in the same area, and I just loved these kids, and they loved me, and we used to play. It didn't matter I was a guy, it didn't matter they were Jews. And what I loved was going home, and I mean, their homes were very European. It was a totally different sort of life than I was living at home. And they were lovely people. Their mothers were lovely, and God bless her, they were in Australia and not back in Austria in those days. But no, that started a lifelong love affair with Jewish people. And then I've always admired the creative genius of, in my case, of Broadway, with all the wonderful Jewish songwriters and music writers and, wonderful.
And you've been quite involved in the Melbourne Jewish community as well.
Well, I've done things for WIZO and, or what is it, WIZO? WIZO, of course.
Women's International Zionist Organisation.
And fundraisers and whatever. Of course, why not? I always say, I said to Michael Danby, we can never make amends for what's happened to the Jewish people. So in my little way, I do what I can. And it's been a joy. And I've met lovely people like you and others. Thank you. Scores of others, yes.
We just enjoy the real place that you come from.
Well, I'm just, thank God that I met these kids and, playing whatever we played.
So it's
Cowboys, Indians probably.
And it's like
they were lovely little boys. They'd come from Europe and I mean, I was probably their first Australian friend. I don't know, but anyway, they were a joy to know.
It comes back to that thing we were talking about with relationships.
Kids are all the same.
Yeah.
Kids just want to have friends and play games and.
But to still be friends with the kids.
And my mother was thrilled that I had Jewish friends. She was so thrilled because, Europe, there were Italians and Greeks and Maltese living around. And we weren't entirely Anglo-Saxon, as a lot of people think that we were, but we weren't entirely Anglo-Saxon. We did have ethnic people living. The Italians ran the fruiterers, the Greeks ran the fish and chip shops. Even then, it's a long time ago. But I think she was lovely, and when I would talk about lovely things I'd eaten and the music I'd listened to, she was thrilled. She thought it was giving me a veneer, a European sophistication.
And have you picked up some Yiddish words over the years?
Oh, yeah, well, the sugar and mensch and you name it.
Some nice ones.
Yeah.
John Michael, you're pretty well known for a lot of the celebrity stuff and a lot of the Hollywood stuff, but you're also very into politics, and you're very knowledgeable, and you have very definite ideas and views on politics.
Well, I did have a radio show for 12 years on 3AW where I could vent my spleen and reveal my innermost thoughts.
I wasn't sure whether we should mention that, but now that you have, please talk to us about
what happened was I was listening to the show one day and they came up with a whole lot of balderdash about something or other, and I called in and said, "You've just got that entirely wrong." And a couple of weeks later, one of the guys doing the show left, and the management called me up and said, "Oh, we heard you on the phone, would you like to?" Darren James actually suggested that I might be a good replacement, and I went in, and of course Nick McCullum was my colleague and adversary, and I made no excuse that I have a rather conservative point of view and certain values which I hold steadfast, and I had a lot of followers because I believe there's a lot of people out there that believe the same thing but don't have the voice to say it. The radical left gets plenty of exposure and the conservative right doesn't get much at all.
Well, they're the silent majority.
There is, and we proved that at the last election. There is a silent majority, and I do think there are many things that are pushed down our throats by the loudmouth left or radical left that people don't agree with, but they're too frightened to come out and say that's a load of rubbish.
Absolutely. Now, you were in radio for a really long time as well as television.
But I'm not a radio person. I just got the job to be a commentator. If I'd have been a radio person 40 years ago, I never would have got a job. My voice is too strange. Everybody, you had the Jeff Mannion voice or the Norman Banks voice. There were people trained to be perfectly enunciated, or the ABC voice.
Well,
it was only since Darren Hinch. Darren Hinch was one of the first people that had a non-radio voice who became a great success on radio.
I was actually a Lee Murray girl. I was trained by Lee Murray for many years.
You and about 2 dozen others. Newton went to Lee Murray. Philip Brady went to Lee Murray. Mike Walsh went to Lee Murray. The number of people that went to Lee Murray, I never did, because I never was interested in being on radio in those days, and later on it didn't matter anyway, because the days of the perfectly enunciated radio announcer was gone.
That's very true. And Lee Murray really was one of the last of these fabulous gentlemen.
He was.
Absolutely. Moved back to Australia as she got more elderly. Talk a little bit about the relationship that you had.
Well, we were good friends. I mean, and she loved politics and I loved politics, and we loved conversation, and that's basically it. She travelled. When I lived in America, I made sure she travelled a lot, and she went to London for the royal wedding. That was her. I took her.
How exciting that you brought her over for that!
Yeah, and the first one, Diane Child, and she went to I took her to the Oscars 3 times, and backwards and forwards.
What was it like for her? What did she say?
Well, she made a lot of friends in Los Angeles, and after a while, it just became like she was living there, and we had very, very good, long-standing friendships with people, and She was absorbed into a lifestyle there with the very, very dear friends who have become like almost family. Well, they are family to me.
Yes.
And that was the great thing about it. So it wasn't like she went there and she was a tourist, because although I took her to all the touristy things you do in New York and I mean, one of the things that was absolutely marvellous, I covered the filming of Gandhi and in India. And then when the film was premiered, I went to the premieres in London and Washington and Los Angeles, and umpteen cities around the world, because they were all in aid of UNICEF. And we did a coverage of that. I did it for Columbia Pictures, actually, not for Channel 9. I did it for Columbia Pictures. And so I went to all these events. Well, I got to know Sir Richard Attenborough very well, and a lot of the stars of the show and whatever. And when it was nominated for the Oscars, I took Mum to Hollywood, and of course it won a heap of Oscars. And at the party afterwards, to which we were invited, there she was sitting with a table full of Oscars in front of her, you know, with all these, I mean, marvellous things like that. Anyway, a spin-off of that was we were invited to Atlanta, where they were giving Sir Richard Attenborough a special award. The Martin Luther King Foundation was giving him a special award. And we were invited by Columbia Pictures. I couldn't believe it, you know. So off we go down to Atlanta and put in a beautiful hotel. I think it was called the Peachtree Plaza, beautiful hotel. And we went to this do. And Mrs. Coretta King was there, a whole lot of African-American luminaries, obviously, and Lord Attenborough, and Vice President, as he was then, George Bush, George the Elder.
Wow, yeah.
And we met the Vice President, which was wonderful. My mother there, in all my years, I never expected to meet the Vice. And he had a lovely chat to us, because the accent stood out, like, you know. And he was lovely. So there, I mean, that's the sort of thing you just can't ever imagine. So there we were, not only talking to Mrs. Coretta King, Martin Luther King's widow, but also, and Lord Attenborough, but also the Vice President. I mean, marvellous things.
Mind-boggling stuff.
Yeah. So there you go.
Were you constantly living in the moment, or were there things that you wanted to do that you really had to go out and do?
Well, you see, I was so busy, things were coming in so fast, I didn't have any time. Unfortunately, I think in many ways it delayed me writing a lot of things, because I was so busy covering movies and all these, you know, premieres and Oscars and whatever. But I did, when I came back to Australia in the late 1990s, I saw The Boy from Oz with Todd McKenney, and I thought, what a great idea that there's an Australian story as a musical and a hit. And I thought to myself, you know, I'm sure there are other Australians that would warrant a musical. So I came up with the idea of a musical about Johnny O'Keefe. Mm-hmm. And my friend who had been my producer on the Waltz show, David Mitchell, and I had discussed this. And I said to David, would you like to work with me on with Johnny O'Keefe? What a great idea. Next thing we knew, Kevin Jacobson said he would do it, and it turned out to be a massive hit, and a massive hit for David Campbell, who played Johnny O'Keefe. So when we finished that, David and myself said, what are we going to do next? Oh, I don't know what. So I was living in LA, and David called me up and said, I've got the next show. I said, what's that? He said, Dusty Springfield, because he just read a book about Dusty Springfield. So I said, great. So I came back to Australia, and we worked on that with a gentleman called Mel Morrow. And then we found a backer for that. It was the money man to do the workshop, Mr. John Gilbert, who had nothing to do with theatre. He's a builder, developer. And he and his wife Barbara are absolutely, you know, the word angel, where you get people who back shows, they're called angels. They are angels. They're archangels.
How did you find them to back a show?
Because it was the producer of the show with the non-existent show. I mean, we had the script, but no show. And was Dennis Smith, who's I've known Dennis for years. He used to produce a show at Channel 10 called The Go Show, and he does now Go Show revivals at the Palais in St Kilda, which are very successful. Anyway, Dennis Smith said to John Gilbert one night, "Oh, I'm looking for money to do this show." And John Gilbert said, "Well, how much money do you need?" I mean, how wonderful. He didn't even have to pitch
I love that.
It was a miracle. So we did Dusty, and then I decided I wanted to do a show about Bobby Darin. I'd read a book called Dream Lovers by Dodd Darin, who's the son of Bobby Darin and Sandra Dee. I thought, what a great story, and it is a great story. Excuse me. Anyway, I got to work on that with my cousin Frank, and it was sitting there, and John Bactor came in again, and a lady called Barbara Harper, who worked for John, took it to Gordon Frost, and they loved the idea, but unfortunately they didn't do it for 8 or 9 years. I nearly went mad waiting for them to do the show. I mean, I thought I won't live to see this show ever produced.
It was really wonderful once
it was when it happened. But the funny part, we only did Sydney and Melbourne, and then David Campbell, who again played Bobby Darin, said, "Oh, I don't want to do it anymore." And they, instead of hiring someone else to fill in, they just closed the show. That's it.
They must have worked at the ABC at one stage.
I've never been able to work out. Well, none of us can work out why you'd close the show that was packing them in. I mean, people were lining up to get cancellations. We packed out the State Theatre at the Arts Centre every single night.
And they didn't tour it everywhere.
Never tour it. And the thing about that, where you make a lot of money with a show or a consistent income, is if the show goes into the non-professional theatre and is done by amateur groups, and the royalties can be quite good if that happens. Well, that's not happening because the show's hanging in space somewhere. Dodd Darin, who thought it was going to be his father's legacy, is disappointed because he wants the show to go on.
Of course.
Anyway, I thought, I can't worry about this anymore. So I thought, what am I going to do? What am I going to do next? So I splashed around my swimming pool one day, and I thought, the Andrews Sisters.
Brilliant.
Because I thought of Jersey Boys, which was a great story, although Frankie Valli did. So somebody said to Frankie Valli, "What a great story," and Frankie Valli said, "It's all BS, but it's making us a fortune." Well, anyway, I got the Andrews Sisters story, and I knew nothing about them. When I read this story, it was a fascinating story. See, it's no point in writing something if the story isn't good.
Yep.
You know, I mean, otherwise you just have someone singing the songs without any depth to it. So I finished that. It's called Swing Sisters, and we're in the process of getting that up. It probably won't be on a stage till 2022 because you can't get theatres. So I've done that, and now I'm working on a show about a great Aboriginal tenor that everyone's forgotten about called Harold Blair, who came from a mission station in Queensland and worked in cane fields, and his story of his rise to success is just incredible. And he died, unfortunately, much too young, but a wonderful story about Aboriginal Indigenous people, about the ambition, because he had nothing going for him, nothing. And he became this, classy singer, adored by the public of the time. Now, interestingly enough, we said before about people forgetting things. Very few people remember him or even heard of him.
Or have even heard of him, which
and
is
yet,
really...
What a story.
Yes.
He was discovered by an Australian opera singer who was a star in the United States called Marjorie Lawrence. Now, Marjorie Lawrence got polio and used to sing opera standing on a frame under her costume. She was Wagnerian.
Wow.
And she was one of the greats. and she came out to Australia in 1944 during the war. My God, how she got here, I don't know. She came from there, and she was in Queensland, and a friend of Harold Blair's, who was a little tough union guy, said to her, "You have to hear this."
Because Harold was working just as a labourer.
Yeah, a cane cutter.
Yeah, a what cutter?
A cane cutter.
A cane cutter. And people who worked with him happened to realise his talent.
And he used to sing as a kid with the various groups in that part of there was a fundraiser, because he lived on a mission station and didn't have a lot of money, and to raise money they'd do concerts and things, and he'd sing, and the money had come in, and at one stage he was in the Salvation Army banging a drum. I mean, his story was wonderful.
So hopefully you can get him into some Australian history books.
Well,
and have more
there's
kids.
been a wonderful book written about him, and he is on, I think he's on Wikipedia and whatever, and I think the ABC did a documentary about him. But I'm doing my research through the book that was written about him, and it's a wonderful story of a man overcoming. He doesn't complain. He became an activist for the Aboriginal cause. He did, because he went to America and he actually performed in front of the United Nations.
Wow.
Believe it or not, there was a big...
Wow.
And
he's still not in the history books in Australia.
Anyway, he was very much influenced by the civil rights movement in America, and he could have stayed there, but he felt he had to come back here and work with his people here. So he did. So anyway, it's a good story.
Sounds great.
Again, I don't know whether it'll be on.
And I mean, the Andrews sisters, that's just a winner all the way around.
But you see, what's great about the Andrews sisters is that they're sort of iconic figures linked to World War II with all the wonderful songs they sang during that period. So the first half, it has a lot to do with World War II, with their fundraise, what they call war bonds, appearing in front of thousands, and they made 20-something movies.
Wow.
In fact, interesting enough, they used to say at the studios, put the Andrews sisters in a movie, the box office will go up by 30%. Because there was no television in those days.
Yes.
So if you wanted to see them, you could hear them on the radio. They were on the radio all the time. But to actually see them, you had to go to movies. Yeah. So they were like an enticement for people to go to the movies to see the Andrews. Really. And they were great performers. They really knew how to sing. There were three girls. The eldest was Laverne. She really put the group together. She was the piano player. And she really put them together when they were really kids. Then there was... Maxine, and Maxine turned out to be a very, very smart woman who at one stage after they'd retired became the dean of a women's college. And then there was Patty. Patty was the blonde, the central sort of centre figure, the soloist, and she was Miss Vivacity. I mean, when you see them working, she stands out. And she sort of hung the group together. But it's an interesting story.
It's a great story, but the way you weave stories, like Dream Lovers was fabulous because of the way you put it together. I mean,
Did you hear that, folks? Now, if it comes back, you have to go and see it.
Because, look, the songs are good anyway. There's this good story there, but it's really the way you put it together that makes it a good musical.
I'll tell you what, with jukebox musicals, which that's what they call them, whether it's Shout, Dusty, Dream Lover, Swing Sisters, or whatever. Now, the Harry Blair show will be original music written by our friend Warren Wills. But what it is with a lot of musicals today, not the musicals of the past, not Rodgers and Hammerstein or Rodgers and Hart or Irving Berlin or Jerome Kern or Cole Porter, Iggy Parberg. There were so many great songwriters. They would have a show packed with memorable songs, which would be recorded by the pop stars of the day. So those shows are filled with songs. Now we've got to the stage where they only have maybe one song you can remember, if as far as the footpath.
Yes.
You're walking out of the theatre and you're thinking, whereas every song in those old musicals like Oklahoma, Annie Get Your Gun, Silk Stockings, whatever.
Memorable.
You remember, you'd be singing them under the shower for days.
Yes.
In fact, that was the way that the artists and repertoire men looked at it. Would people whistle or sing these songs under the shower? And that's why they would get people like Bing Crosby or Joe Stafford or Frank Sinatra or whoever of that ilk of that day to record them. And so by the time the show opened, audiences knew the hits, they'd heard them on the radio. Well, we don't have a hit parade anymore. And so these songs, there's no way to promote original songs. You have to see the show to hear the song. But what it is with a lot of young composers that write musicals, they seem to want to impress you with their brilliance, but not... See, Lionel, I'll use this example. Lionel Bart could not read or write music. He could sort of finger a tune out on a piano. He used to hum his tunes to a musician who would write them down. Now have a look at Oliver. Every song you remember.
Yes.
You remember. You go to a lot of musicals today that not the original musicals. You can't remember most of the songs. You can't remember. Whereas if you see a song, that's why shows like ours have been successful. Like the Carole King musical was successful, and why the Jersey Boys and many others are successful because people can know the songs not when they're walking out of the theatre, but when they're walking into the theatre, they know the songs.
And Warren Wills is fabulous. So really looking forward to hearing your collaboration on that.
Looking forward to about 3 years too. Because, it'd be wonderful if you workshop them and they could say, we're opening next week. But there's theatres, it's a big problem, booking the theatres.
Well, John Michael, the energy that you have about you in whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's radio, whether it's television with these theatre and musicals, is just fabulous. The other thing I really just wanted to touch on with you, because it's also the most important thing, no matter what you do with your life or what kind of work you do, is the relationship that you have with people. And you are one of the few wonderful people that have relationships that go back to the year dot. And I know those relationships are important to you. Could you just talk a little bit about about these long-term relationships, because you know that not many people have that many, and also how it enhances I
was an only child, and I treasured friendship. And to me, friends were not just something. I mean, friends are more than friends, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
And that's why I don't know. I just treasure friendships very, very much, very, very much. I think it's wonderful when someone chooses you to be their friend.
Yes.
And confides in you and shares the ups and downs of life. I just...
Because you meet new people every day.
Yes, but you don't make my friends, I must say, the ones that they go back decades. But I mean, what I say to people is that if you've got a friend, tell them how much they mean to you. I've been to a lot of funerals lately as part of the course, and I often say, I'm so glad I said at some stage, you mean a lot to me. Mm-hmm. I think that's very important to let your family and your friends know that you care for them. Never assume that they know.
Yes. Never
assume that, I didn't tell Dad I loved him because he knew. No, don't assume that. Say, Dad, I love you. And that's very important.
Absolutely.
Say the words. It's very important. And I think one of the problems today, with the way families are today, a lot of people never hear those words from their mother, their father, or the father and mother never hear it from children. Everybody assumes without actually saying the words. And I'm a great one for verbalising your emotions. Very important. And I'm so glad I've said that to people who are no longer with us, because they knew at least I was, I cared.
Absolutely.
And they cared for me, that's very important, that people care for you as well.
And I was also going to ask you, is there anything else that you wished you had done that you hadn't, but you're still doing it?
Yeah, I would have liked to have done... I've done 5 terrible movies or 6 terrible movies, bit parts, sort of featured role. I would have liked to have done a really good role in a movie. I'm blessed that I've done I've had fun doing them. They were all terrible, but
but you could still write one.
No, I don't know. If you think it takes a long time to get a stage show up, I mean, you read Bruce Beresford's book about, one of our great directors, about the hell he's been through in his life trying to get money up for movies. I mean, it's a nightmare.
Yes.
And too difficult. If you're even in Hollywood, look, one of the things that used to get me in Hollywood was meeting, as they say, everybody has a script in their back pocket, with a number of people that had film projects that they've been waiting to get going for years.
But, John Michael, it's, as you said before, there are people with theatre projects they've been waiting to get done for years.
I'm not bad with theatre projects.
Yeah, but you ran into this fabulous investor that made it easy.
You have to be a go-getter. I mean, it's no good. You have to be a promoter. You have to be able to pitch your product. Don't just think you can write it. And in other words, you have to be a salesman. You've got to get out and sell the product.
I have a good friend and acting coach in Los Angeles, Bernard Hiller. I don't know if you came across him, but he says, you're not in the shy business, you're in show business.
Exactly. And I'm, the funny part, I was a very shy little boy. I was not a pusher. I never went out there and, I was always hiding up the back sort of per kid. And embarrassed if anyone called out my name and focused attention on me. So for me to come this far is a miracle. But, I know I'm very lucky. And somebody said to me, you'll love this, somebody said to me, in fact, there's a book coming out at the end of the year called Australian Musicals.
Yeah.
Written by Peter Penny, who's a wonderful producer. He wrote a lot, and he wrote a wonderful Australian musicals years ago, but nobody would do them in the commercial theatre. He and his partner, Don Batty, used to hire church halls and put them on, and they were wonderful shows. But commercial producers, he wouldn't touch an Australian show with a barge pole. Anyway, he and another gentleman called Peter Wiley Johnson have done a book called The History of the Australian Musical, and that's coming out at the end of the year, and I'm looking to see that. But people have said to me, why aren't there more Australian musicals?
Well, you've got some in your back pocket that you're happy to pull out.
But you know what I've said? Not enough Jews. And the reason, no, because look at the American theatre.
Yes.
Thank God for the Jewish writers of the great American theatre songbook.
Yes.
I'm in awe of these wonderful bands. So many of them started off in very straight and poor circumstances that became legendary.
They had a love and a talent.
And used to bang out a tune in a music store on a upright piano and sell sheet music, and went on to become legends, and we're still singing their songs. So I always say that, what we owe to those wonderful, we're still, the only one I can think who wasn't Jewish was Cole Porter. Everybody else was. And still the same goes today.
Huge contributions to the arts generally.
We'll never know how, in fact, I believe there's a documentary coming out about Fiddler on the Roof.
Really?
Yeah, about how it got up and how it, it became a legend it's become. And I saw Zero Mostel do it, and I saw Topol do it. I've seen it about 6 times. I love it. And I must tell you a wonderful story. I was staying with a friend in New York on Central Park South at a wonderful block of apartments, one of those super-duper Art Deco apartment blocks. And going downstairs, I got in, the elevator door opened, and who was standing there but Zero Mostel?
Wow.
And I was awestruck. And I said to him, after, as we were going down, I said, "Oh, Mr. Mostel, I think you're marvellous." And he said, "Yes, I am."
I absolutely love that story. John Michael, this has been an absolute delight. I am so thrilled that you've come on Lily, High on Life, and we've been able to do this interview.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Lily. Thank you.
Looking